Broken heart, my world ended the moment my husband chose her instead of me. I was standing in the middle of my living room, my heart racing, my knees weak, my soul shaking. His eyes, those same eyes that once promised me forever, were now looking at her with a softness I had not seen in years. He reached for her hand, and in that single moment, my whole life shattered. My world collapsed, my chest burned, and I felt like the ground had opened beneath my feet. But you know what hurt the most? He didn't even look back at me. Not once. Before I take you deeper into my story, let me introduce myself properly. My name is Margaret Lewis, but everyone calls me Maggie. I am 66 years old, and I'm speaking to you right now from South Carolina, USA. If you are listening to me, please do me one small favor. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to my channel, and click the notification bell, so you don't miss more of my upcoming stories. And before I continue, I'd love to know, which part of the country are you watching from? Tell me in the comments, because I truly care to know. Now let's go back to the beginning. Because for you to understand how my world ended, you must first know how it all began. When I was a young girl, love was the dream of my heart. I grew up in a small town where everybody knew everybody. I was not the prettiest girl in school, nor the smartest, but I had a smile people said could light up a room. I met Daniel, yes, that's my husband's name, when I was only 19. He was tall, strong, with a voice that could melt butter. He had dreams of becoming a successful businessman, and I admired him because he carried himself with confidence. Daniel pursued me like a man who had found treasure. He wrote me letters, brought me flowers, and promised me a life of joy. And me? I believed every word. At 21, I walked down the aisle, wearing a borrowed white dress and carrying lilies in my hands. My father cried that day, but I only smiled because I believed my life was just beginning. The first few years of marriage were beautiful. We lived in a small rented apartment, where the paint peeled from the walls and the ceiling leaked whenever it rained, but I didn't care. We had love. And with love, everything seemed possible. I cooked for him, cleaned for him, and when money was tight, I took sewing jobs from the neighbors to make ends meet. Daniel always said to me, "One day, Maggie, I'll give you a big house. You'll never have to work another day in your life." But as the years passed, things began to change. The little things he once adored about me started to annoy him. The way I laughed too loudly. The way I worried about money. The way I prayed every night before bed. He grew restless. And I told myself that marriage had ups and downs, so I kept holding on. We had 2 children, Emily and Thomas, who became my world. I poured my whole being into raising them, teaching them kindness, teaching them faith. But somewhere along the way, Daniel grew distant. He started working late nights. He started traveling more. And when he came home, his smile no longer reached his eyes. The first time I suspected another woman, I shook the thought from my head. Not Daniel, I told myself. He's just busy. He loves me. But deep inside, a seed of doubt began to grow. One night, when he thought I was asleep, I heard him whispering on the phone. His voice was soft, gentle, the way it used to be with me. My heart pounded. My stomach twisted. I wanted to believe it was business, but my soul knew better. The breaking point came one Sunday afternoon. I had just returned from church, my Bible still in my hand, when he walked into the living room with her. Her name was Sarah. She was younger than me, prettier than me, with hair that shone like gold in the sunlight. She didn't even try to hide her smile as she looked at me, standing in my own home. Daniel cleared his throat and said words that tore me apart. "Maggie, I can't do this anymore. I love Sarah. I choose her." Broken heart, my knees gave way. The room spun. My heart stopped. My world ended the moment my husband chose her instead of me. I screamed his name, begged him to remember the years we shared, the children we raised, the promises we made before God. But he only lowered his head, ashamed, while Sarah stood taller, proud, like she had won a battle I never knew I was fighting. And then, just when I thought nothing could hurt more, Daniel reached out and took her hand. Right there in front of me. That was the dagger through my soul. I could not breathe. I could not think. The woman I trusted my whole life to was walking away with another woman, and he didn't even look back. But that was only the beginning. Because what happened next? Oh, my dear, you will not believe it. The phone call had shattered me, and for hours I could barely think. Emily, my little girl, my heart outside my body, had been hurt, and I wasn't there to protect her. Thomas clung to me as I sat on the cold kitchen floor, shaking and crying. I wanted to blame Daniel, to scream at him for everything, but what good would that do? My anger felt useless when the reality was far crueler than any words could describe. I grabbed my coat and ran to the hospital, ignoring the rain that drenched me to the bone. Every street I drove down felt endless, every red light like a test of patience I didn't have. My mind raced with images of Emily's tiny face, her curly hair damp from the accident, her little hands that always reached for mine. I kept muttering under my breath, "Please God, don't let anything happen to her." When I arrived, the waiting room was eerily quiet. Doctors and nurses moved quickly, but nobody came to me. My chest tightened with panic, and I felt like I was suffocating. Finally, a nurse appeared, her eyes sympathetic but firm. "Are you Margaret Lewis?" she asked. I nodded, barely able to speak. "Your daughter, she's stable, but it was serious. She has broken bones, a concussion, and several bruises. We're doing everything we can." I sank into the chair, relief and terror battling inside me. At least she was alive. But the words serious and concussion weighed like stones on my chest. I wanted to see her, to hold her, to make everything okay again. But I was told I had to wait. While I sat there, I thought about the accident. How could this happen? Daniel had been driving them? Or was it a coincidence, a cruel twist of fate? My mind replayed every moment of the last few weeks. The arguments, the cold glances, the constant reminders that my family was being torn apart. I realized just how fragile life was, how quickly happiness could vanish. Hours passed like days. Finally, a doctor came and said I could see her. I ran down the hall, my heart pounding so fast it felt like it might explode. And there she was, lying in a hospital bed, tubes and bandages everywhere. But her eyes opened when she saw me. "Mama," she whispered, her voice weak. I grabbed her tiny hand, tears streaming down my face. "I'm here, baby. I'm right here." We spent that night in the hospital. I refused to leave her side, holding her hand, talking to her softly and praying. Every time she stirred, I felt a knife in my heart. But amidst the fear, I realized something. Even in the worst moments, love was the strongest force I had. The next morning, Daniel arrived at the hospital. My blood boiled. I wanted to yell, scream, hit him, but Emily needed calm, not chaos. I stood facing him, my eyes blazing. "She's alive," I said, my voice shaking. "And she's going to recover. But don't think for a second I'll let you take her from me." Daniel's face was emotionless. "We'll see what the court decides." I couldn't believe it. Even at my daughter's weakest moment, he cared more about legal battles than her well-being. And in that instant, I realized the fight was no longer just for me. It was for my children, my family, my life. I had to be stronger than I ever thought possible. Over the next few weeks, Emily recovered slowly. She was brave, stronger than anyone I knew. But Daniel and Sarah didn't stop their torment. They continued their legal maneuvers, sending letters, making threats, and trying to intimidate me. Some nights, I slept with one eye open, fearing what they might do next. Then came the next extreme event that shook me to my very core. One evening, while I was cooking dinner, I heard a crash in the living room. My heart stopped. I ran in and found Thomas on the floor, surrounded by broken glass. He was bleeding from a cut on his forehead, and the lamp lay shattered beside him. Before I could catch my breath, the front door slammed open. Daniel was there, and Sarah, she was laughing. I froze. I couldn't believe my eyes. They had come into my home, and they weren't stopping. Sarah sneered at me. "Thought you could get rid of us? Not a chance." Daniel didn't even try to stop her. He just stood there, calm, watching me struggle to keep my children safe. My heart pounded, adrenaline surging through my veins. I grabbed Thomas and ran to the bedroom, locking the door. Emily was too weak to move, so I held her in my arms, whispering, "It's okay, babies. Mommy's here. Mommy won't let anything happen to you." I realized then that my life had changed completely. I could no longer trust anyone, not even the man I had loved for decades. My world had shattered again, and I understood something crucial. I had to fight, not for revenge but for survival, for my children, for myself. And as I stood there in the dark bedroom holding my children, I knew one thing. The next move I made could either destroy me completely or finally set me free. I held Emily and Thomas tightly, my heart hammering like a drum in my chest. The bedroom felt like a tiny island of safety, but the sound of Daniel and Sarah laughing in the living room made me feel like the walls were closing in. I pressed my ear against the door listening, trying to figure out what they were planning. "Mommy," Thomas whispered, his small hand clutching mine. His eyes were wide with fear. I swallowed my panic and forced a smile. "It's okay, baby. We're safe here. Mommy's not going to let anything happen to you." But inside, I was shaking. For the first time in my life, I felt completely powerless. Everything I had built, every memory, every bit of love I had given to this family, it all seemed under threat in that moment. Hours passed, or maybe minutes, I couldn't tell. Time had lost all meaning. Eventually, the sounds of their voices faded. I peeked through the crack in the door. They were gone. Just like that, the danger disappeared, leaving me trembling in the aftermath. I called the police, of course, and they arrived quickly. They inspected the house, took statements, and assured me that I and the children were safe for now. But the truth was, I didn't feel safe anywhere anymore. Not in my home. Not in the world I thought I knew. The following days were filled with constant vigilance. I installed locks, alarms, and even security cameras. I learned how to defend myself in ways I had never imagined. I had no choice. Survival had become a skill I had to master. Despite everything, life had to go on. Emily began physical therapy for her injuries, and I spent long hours helping her practice walking again. Thomas, still shaken, clung to me constantly, needing reassurance that everything would be okay. Slowly, our home began to feel a little more normal again. But then, as if the universe had a cruel sense of timing, something else happened that would change everything. One morning, I received a letter in the mail, hand-delivered. The envelope was thick and heavy, and my hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a photograph. Emily and Thomas playing in the park. But behind them, barely noticeable, was Daniel. And beside him, Sarah. They had been watching us, following us, spying on my family. My blood ran cold. I realized that the danger was far from over. The woman my husband had chosen, my supposed enemy, was willing to do anything to come between me and my children. And Daniel, he was allowing it. Days passed in a blur of anxiety. I kept the children close, never leaving their side. Every sound outside made me jump. Every knock on the door made my heart race. But even in this chaos, I refused to show weakness. I had survived worse, and I knew I had to fight. Then came the next extreme event, one I could never have anticipated. One evening, while Emily was practicing her walking exercises and Thomas was playing quietly on the floor, I heard the sound of shattering glass again. This time, it wasn't the lamp. It wasn't the door. It was the window. I ran to the window and saw a car speeding away. But inside, lying on the front lawn, was a package. A box. And on top of it, a single note in Sarah's handwriting. "Next time it won't just be a scare." I froze, staring at the box. My mind raced. What was inside? What were they capable of? My children were right there, and I realized with a sickening clarity that our lives could be taken from us in an instant. I scooped Emily and Thomas into my arms, heart racing, and called the police again. They came quickly, but the fear didn't leave me. It followed me everywhere, a constant shadow over every meal, every step, every moment of quiet. I realized then that life had changed forever. I could not rely on Daniel. I could not trust Sarah. I could not pretend that anything was safe or normal. I had to be brave, not just for myself but for my children. And as I stood there holding my babies tightly, I made a promise to myself. No matter what came next, I would protect them. I would survive. I would rise from the ashes of my broken life. The police had taken the box away, carefully inspecting it for explosives or anything harmful. I watched them holding Emily and Thomas tightly, praying that whatever was inside wouldn't harm us. The children clung to me, sensing my fear even if they didn't fully understand it. That night I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the house, every whisper of the wind felt like a threat. By morning, life seemed to settle into a tense rhythm. Emily was recovering, her steps more confident, her laughter returning slowly. Thomas tried to be brave, telling me, "Mommy, don't worry. We're okay." And I wanted to believe him. I wanted to cling to the moments of peace that still existed between the storms. But peace was a fragile thing. Daniel and Sarah's presence loomed over us like a shadow I could never shake. Every court date, every lawyer letter, every unexpected knock at the door reminded me that the battle was far from over. I focused on my children, trying to make our home a place of love and safety. I cooked meals, helped Emily with her therapy exercises, and told stories to Thomas at bedtime. We laughed when we could, and sometimes, just sometimes, I felt a flicker of hope. Yet the fear never completely left. One evening, as I was tucking Emily into bed, I noticed a small envelope slipped under her door. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a photo of Emily and Thomas, taken from outside our window, and a message scrawled across the bottom. "Smile, Margaret. We see everything." I froze. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just harassment anymore. This was stalking. Sarah had crossed every boundary imaginable, and Daniel's silence was deafening. I realized then that I could no longer rely on anyone. The law might protect me, but it couldn't stop them from following us, from terrorizing us in subtle, terrifying ways. I needed a plan. I needed strength I didn't know I had. Over the next few days, I installed new locks on every door and window, cameras, motion detectors. I even began carrying a small alarm with me everywhere. My life had become a series of precautions, each day carefully measured to protect my children and myself. And then came the extreme event that would change everything yet again. One afternoon, while Emily was resting and Thomas was playing quietly in the living room, I heard the sound of breaking glass. My heart jumped into my throat. I ran to the window and saw Sarah standing in the front yard, holding a brick. Before I could react, she hurled it through the window, shattering the glass and sending shards flying everywhere. Thomas screamed, and Emily started crying, terrified. I grabbed the children and ran to the back of the house, pressing our bodies against the wall. Sarah laughed, a cold, cruel sound that echoed in my ears. Daniel stood behind her, doing nothing. My chest burned with a mix of fear and fury. I wanted to confront them, to scream, to fight, but I couldn't risk the children's safety. The police were called again, but this time I knew it wouldn't be enough. Sarah's obsession was dangerous, and Daniel's willingness to let her continue made everything worse. I realized with a sinking heart that our lives had entered a new level of danger, one I was not prepared for. I spent the night huddled with Emily and Thomas in the smallest room in the house, the sound of sirens fading in the distance. I whispered promises to my children, telling them I would protect them no matter what. And in that moment, I knew something fundamental. Survival was no longer enough. I had to fight back. The morning after the attack, the house was in chaos. Broken glass littered the floor, furniture was toppled, and the children were still shaking from the ordeal. Emily clung to me, whispering, "Mommy, I'm scared," while Thomas held tightly to my leg, refusing to let go. I felt a wave of determination wash over me. This could not continue. I could not allow Sarah and Daniel to control our lives through fear. I called a security company and requested the fastest installation possible. Cameras, alarms, reinforced locks, they all went in within a day. I also spoke with the police again, filing another report and requesting patrols near our home. The officers were sympathetic, but I knew the law could only do so much. Protection had to start with me. After the chaos settled a little, I tried to focus on my children. I made breakfast, helped Emily with her exercises, and even took Thomas outside to play for a short while. I wanted to remind myself and them that life could still have moments of peace. Yet even amidst these small victories, the shadow of Daniel and Sarah loomed. Every time the doorbell rang or a car drove by slowly, my heart leapt into my throat. The fear was constant, exhausting, and relentless. Then came a small, temporary relief. Daniel called one evening. I braced myself, expecting threats or manipulation. But this time, his voice was unusually calm. "Margaret, we need to talk," he said. I hesitated. Could I trust him? Could he possibly be reconsidering his choices? The temptation to believe that things might return to normal was almost unbearable. We agreed to meet in a neutral place, a small cafe downtown. I arrived early, my heart pounding, Emily and Thomas safe at home with a trusted neighbor. When Daniel walked in, I studied him closely. He looked the same, handsome, confident, but there was a coldness in his eyes that I had come to recognize. Sarah was nowhere in sight. I thought maybe, just maybe, this would be different. But it wasn't. Daniel's words were like ice. "I'm sorry for what's happened," he began. "But I'm choosing Sarah. There's nothing you can do to change that." I felt my chest tighten. Years of love, shared memories, family life, all erased in a single sentence. My anger surged, but I forced myself to remain calm. I had learned through pain and terror that reacting impulsively could put my children and me in danger. And just as I turned to leave, thinking this conversation was over, something happened that would escalate the danger beyond anything I had imagined. A man entered the cafe, his face partially covered by a hat. He approached Daniel, speaking in low, urgent tones. I couldn't hear what he said, but Daniel's expression changed instantly: shock, fear, and then something darker, almost panic. Before I could react, the man shoved Daniel roughly, knocking his chair over. The cafe erupted into chaos. People screamed and scattered, but I froze, unable to move. Then I saw the man pull something from his coat. A gun. Broken heart, my heart stopped. The world around me blurred. Daniel, the man who had once been my entire life, was now the target of someone's rage. The children were miles away, safe for now, but I felt a cold realization settle over me. The danger was no longer just emotional. It had become deadly. I could barely breathe. The sight of the man pointing a gun at Daniel made my hands shake uncontrollably. People screamed and dove under tables. The air smelled of coffee, perfume, and fear. For a brief moment I froze, paralyzed by shock. But then instinct took over. I ducked behind a table, pulling myself close to the floor. My eyes never left Daniel. He was trying to stay calm, his hands raised slightly, but I could see the panic in his eyes. The man was shaking, muttering something under his breath, and I realized how quickly life could spiral into chaos. Suddenly there was a loud bang. My ears rang and my heart skipped a beat. A bullet had hit the wall just inches from Daniel. Chaos erupted further. Customers screamed and ran for the exits. Chairs toppled, and coffee spilled across the floor. I clutched my purse like a lifeline and whispered a silent prayer. The gunman moved closer, and I could see the intent in his eyes. Anger, desperation, perhaps revenge. I had no idea who he was, but one thing was clear. Daniel had enemies, and I had been blind to how dangerous this situation had become. In the commotion, a police officer tackled the man. The gun fired once more, but miraculously no one was hit this time. Daniel was shaken but unharmed. I exhaled a breath I didn't know I was holding, my knees weak as I realized how close death had come to our lives. After the chaos settled, I stepped outside, the cool air hitting my damp face. My hands were still trembling, and I felt tears sting my eyes. I called Emily and Thomas immediately, making sure they were okay. Hearing their voices brought a small wave of relief, but the fear lingered. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind replayed every detail of the cafe, the gun, the man's eyes. The thought that danger could appear anywhere, at any time, not at me. I hugged my children tightly, feeling the fragility of life more acutely than ever. In the days that followed, the police investigation revealed that the gunman was connected to a business rival of Daniel's. He had mistaken him as the one who had wronged him. The truth brought little comfort. The fact remained. Daniel's decisions had created a ripple of danger that touched my life directly. I realized something crucial. The people I once trusted could not protect me. I had to rely on my own strength and resilience. I began training myself to stay alert, learning self-defense techniques, and making plans for any potential threats. My home became fortified, my vigilance constant, and my determination unbreakable. Yet life has a way of testing us even in moments of hard-won calm. One afternoon, while Emily was reading quietly and Thomas was building blocks on the floor, the phone rang. My stomach sank the moment I saw the caller ID. It was Sarah. Her voice was cold and deliberate. "You think you're safe, Margaret? You have no idea what's coming next." I slammed the phone down, shaking with rage and fear. Sarah's threats were no longer abstract. They were real, persistent, and relentless. Every day felt like walking on a knife's edge. And then the next extreme event occurred, one I could not have prepared for. That evening, as I tucked Emily into bed, I heard screaming from the backyard. I ran to the window and saw smoke rising. My heart stopped. Flames were engulfing the back fence and spreading toward the garden. Someone had set fire to our home. I ran outside, my children in my arms, screaming for help. Neighbors called the fire department, and I could only watch as the fire consumed part of the backyard, licking dangerously close to the house. My home, the one place I had tried to make safe, was under attack again. The fire department arrived just in time, their sirens blaring through the quiet neighborhood. I held Emily and Thomas tightly as firefighters battled the flames that had spread across our backyard. The smoke stung my eyes and filled my lungs, making me cough uncontrollably. My heart pounded as I realized how close we had come to losing everything. Once the fire was under control, the firefighters explained that it had been set deliberately. My blood ran cold. Someone had targeted us, someone who wanted to destroy my home. And maybe more than that, to terrorize me and my children. I hugged Emily and Thomas as tightly as I could. "It's okay," I whispered, my voice breaking. "We're safe now. Mommy's not letting anything happen to us." But the truth was, I couldn't stop shaking. The realization hit me hard. Daniel and Sarah's actions were no longer just emotional attacks or legal battles. They had become violent, dangerous, and unpredictable. I had to find a way to protect my children and myself from escalating harm. The following days were a blur of cleaning, repairs, and heightened security measures. I installed stronger locks, extra cameras, and motion detectors all around the property. I even hired a temporary security guard to watch the house during the day, while I focused on the children. Every sound, every knock, every shadow made me jump. Yet in the midst of all this fear, there were small moments of light. Emily smiled as she practiced her walking exercises, and Thomas laughed when he built a tower of blocks taller than himself. Those little moments reminded me that life could still hold fragments of happiness, even when surrounded by danger. One evening, while tucking the children into bed, I thought about my own life, how much I had endured and how much I had survived. I realized something crucial. Fear could not control me. I had to be strong for myself and for my children. I had to rise above the chaos that Daniel and Sarah had unleashed. But fate had other plans. The next extreme event arrived suddenly and without warning. It was late at night when I heard a loud banging at the front door. My heart leapt into my throat. I crept to the window and saw Daniel standing there, holding a suitcase. His expression was unreadable. Before I could react, the door burst open and Sarah pushed past him, screaming my name. "I told you, Margaret. You'll never be rid of me," she shouted. I grabbed the children and ran to the bedroom, locking the door behind us. Sarah pounded on the door, screaming and threatening us. Daniel stood by silently, letting her act without intervening. My chest burned with a mixture of fear and fury. I realized in that moment that I could no longer depend on Daniel for protection. I called the police immediately, but Sarah and Daniel were gone by the time they arrived. The officers promised to increase patrols, but I knew they couldn't be everywhere at once. The danger had become personal, unpredictable, and constant. After that night, life became a delicate balance between fear and survival. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow outside the window, made my heart race. Emily and Thomas sensed my anxiety and clung to me more than ever. I tried to remain calm for them, but inside, I felt the weight of exhaustion pressing down on my soul. I spent days fortifying the house further. Extra locks, reinforced doors, alarms, and even motion-sensitive lights. I learned basic self-defense techniques and practiced escape routes in case the unthinkable happened again. I knew I couldn't rely on anyone else to keep us safe. Not Daniel, not the police. This was my responsibility, and I was determined to protect my children at all costs. Yet life demanded moments of normalcy too. I took the children to the park during the day, helped Emily with schoolwork, and even allowed Thomas to ride his bike outside while I watched carefully from the porch. Those small victories were precious. They reminded me that our lives were not entirely defined by fear. One afternoon, while Emily practiced walking with her crutches and Thomas built towers of blocks, I received a call that made my blood run cold. It was Daniel. I froze as I answered the phone, dreading what he might say next. "I need to talk to you," he said, his voice unusually serious. "Meet me at the cafe downtown alone." I hesitated. Could this be a trap? Was he going to use this meeting to manipulate me further, or worse? But I knew I couldn't ignore him. The children were asleep with a neighbor for a few hours, and I felt a sliver of determination to confront the truth. When I arrived at the cafe, Daniel was already there. His eyes were tense, and for the first time, I saw a hint of fear in his expression. "Margaret, this isn't going to be easy," he said. Before I could respond, Sarah walked in. My heart stopped. She smiled as if she owned the entire world. I realized then that Daniel had no intention of ending her involvement. He had chosen her completely, and I was powerless. Suddenly, a man appeared behind Sarah, holding a knife. Panic surged through the cafe as people screamed and scattered. My chest tightened and I grabbed my purse, ready to defend myself if necessary. The man lunged at Sarah and chaos erupted. Tables overturned, coffee spilled, and people shouted for help. I froze, unable to move, my eyes fixed on the knife and the violence unfolding before me. Daniel was shouting, trying to restrain the attacker. But the man was wild and desperate. I realized in that moment that danger could strike anywhere at any time, and that my life, and the lives of my children, would never be safe as long as Daniel and Sarah were involved. The knife attack in the cafe left me shaken to my core. My hands were trembling, my heart pounding so hard I could barely breathe. People were screaming, running for safety, and chaos filled the room. Daniel was struggling to restrain the attacker, and Sarah's expression had shifted from smug confidence to sheer terror. I realized in that moment how unpredictable life had become. I backed toward the exit, my mind racing. I needed to get out, to breathe, to think clearly. But something stopped me. Emily and Thomas were at home, vulnerable. I had survived so many attacks, threats, and near-death experiences, but the thought of my children being in danger alone made my blood run cold. I knew I had to act, but I also knew I couldn't do it recklessly. After the police arrived and subdued the attacker, I sat on a bench outside the cafe, trying to calm myself. My legs were weak, my mind numb. The reality was clear. Daniel and Sarah's actions had created a ripple of chaos that no one could contain. And worse, it wasn't just about me anymore. It was about my children, my family, and our safety. Returning home, I fortified my resolve. I installed more security cameras, reinforced all locks, and even reached out to a private investigator to monitor Daniel and Sarah's movements. I realized that relying solely on the law or Daniel's promises would never keep us safe. I had to be proactive. Days passed with tense normalcy. Emily's recovery was progressing, and Thomas tried to maintain a sense of routine. But I knew that danger could strike again at any moment. Every knock at the door, every unfamiliar car passing by, sent my pulse racing. I had to remain vigilant constantly. And then came the next extreme event. One that threatened to take everything from me permanently. One stormy night, while Emily was asleep and Thomas was resting, I heard shouts from outside. I looked out the window and saw a group of people surrounding my house. Their faces were obscured by hoods, and they carried objects that glinted dangerously in the lightning flashes. My stomach twisted. I realized immediately that this was no ordinary threat. This was a coordinated attack. I grabbed the children, telling them to stay low and quiet. "Mommy's here. We're safe, I promise," I whispered, though my voice betrayed my fear. I barricaded the doors and windows, using whatever I could find: chairs, tables, even heavy pots. The storm raged outside, rain lashing against the windows, masking the sounds of the intruders. Suddenly, the front door exploded inward. I screamed as figures rushed inside, breaking furniture, overturning everything in their path. I grabbed Emily and Thomas, running to the small hallway, desperately searching for a safe place. My heart pounded, my lungs burned, and I realized how close we were to losing everything. The moment the intruders broke into our home, my instincts kicked in. I grabbed Emily and Thomas, shielding them with my body as I guided them toward the back exit. The storm raged outside, but I knew we had to escape. Every second counted. The sounds of crashing furniture and angry shouts behind us fueled my adrenaline. I realized something I had known all along. Fear could not paralyze me. My children depended on me, and I had to be strong. We ran through the rain-soaked backyard, slipping and sliding, hearts pounding. I clutched Emily close to me while Thomas held tightly to my hand. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the masked figures chasing us. I could hear their shouts, but I refused to look back. Every step was a choice to survive. Finally, I saw the headlights of a neighbor's car approaching. I waved frantically, screaming for help. The neighbors quickly got out and grabbed my children, ushering us into the safety of their home. I collapsed onto the floor, drenched, shaking but relieved. For the first time in days, I felt a tiny sliver of safety. The police arrived shortly after, surrounding our home and arresting the intruders. They were connected to Daniel and Sarah, and the investigation revealed just how far their obsession and cruelty had gone. I realized then that the threat had been relentless, escalating from emotional torment to life-threatening attacks. But with courage, resourcefulness, and support, we had survived. In the days that followed, I made a life-altering decision. Daniel and Sarah would no longer have any influence over my life. I cut off all contact, moved to a safer neighborhood, and focused on rebuilding our home, our lives, and our sense of security. Emily and Thomas thrived in our new environment, surrounded by love and stability. I also discovered a profound truth. Life can change in an instant, and people we trust may betray us. But no matter how dark the circumstances, resilience and courage can guide us through. I learned that protecting those we love often requires facing fear head-on and making difficult choices to safeguard their future. Emily recovered fully, walking confidently and laughing like the bright girl she had always been. Thomas grew stronger, learning that even in the face of danger, love and determination could overcome fear. And me? I found a new sense of strength, a confidence that I could survive anything life threw at me. To everyone watching, remember this. Life may bring betrayal, danger, and heartbreak, but the power to rise above it is within you. Protect your loved ones, trust your instincts, and never let fear control your decisions. Even when the world seems to end, there is always a path to survival and hope. Life after the storm of danger felt like waking from a nightmare I didn't think I would survive. The house was finally quiet, the children asleep in their beds, and for the first time in months, I could breathe without the weight of fear pressing down on me. Emily was thriving. Her steps were steady now, her laughter echoing through the rooms of our new home. Thomas, ever the brave little boy, would often hug me tightly and whisper, "Mommy, we're safe now." And in those moments, I could feel the pieces of my broken world finally starting to come together. I spent my days rebuilding not just our home, but our sense of normalcy. I cooked meals, helped with homework, and played games with the children. I allowed myself to smile again, to dream about a future where Daniel and Sarah had no power over us. Every little victory, Emily learning a new skill, Thomas riding his bike down the driveway, felt like a triumph over the chaos we had endured. Even so, the memories of the past years were never far away. I thought about how quickly trust could be broken, how betrayal could come from those closest to you. But I also realized something powerful. Strength isn't just surviving the storm. It's learning from it, rising stronger, and protecting the ones you love no matter what. I began sharing my story publicly, hoping that others could learn from my experience. Life had taught me lessons that I never wanted to forget. Courage in the face of fear, love that refuses to waver, and the importance of trusting your instincts. I wanted others to know that even when your world seems to end, there is always a path forward. I also found moments of joy I hadn't felt in years. We went to the park, to the beach, and even had small family celebrations. Each laugh, each hug, was a reminder that life could still hold beauty, even after heartbreak. And while Daniel and Sarah were no longer in our lives, their shadow remained as a lesson I carried with me. I learned to be vigilant, to protect my children, and to never allow anyone else to control our happiness. I realized that freedom wasn't just about escaping danger. It was about reclaiming our lives and choosing peace every day. To everyone listening, remember this. Life can be cruel, betrayal can come from those you trust, and danger can appear when you least expect it. But courage, love, and determination can carry you through. Protect your loved ones, trust yourself, and never let fear define your life. Months had passed since the final confrontation with Daniel and Sarah. The house was safe, the children were thriving, and life had settled into a new peaceful rhythm. Yet I knew that healing wasn't just about safety. It was about regaining trust in the world, and in myself. Emily had grown confident in every step she took. Watching her walk across the yard one sunny afternoon, I realized how much strength she had developed through her own struggle. Thomas, with his boundless energy and unshakable curiosity, reminded me daily that even after darkness, joy could flourish. I started keeping a journal, writing down every thought, every fear, and every triumph. It became a way to process the past and remind myself of how far we had come. I also began volunteering at a local women's center, sharing my story with others who had experienced betrayal and danger. There was power in speaking out, in turning pain into lessons that could help others survive and thrive. Life was not perfect. The memories of the past lingered. Sometimes I would wake in the middle of the night, heart pounding, only to realize it was a dream. But I had learned to cope, to transform fear into vigilance, and to cherish every moment of safety and happiness. Then one afternoon, a letter arrived in the mail. My heart raced as I opened it, expecting another threat. But it wasn't from Daniel or Sarah, it was from my lawyer. The court had finalized custody arrangements, giving me full legal guardianship of Emily and Thomas. My heart soared. After all the battles, all the threats, all the nights of fear, the law now protected what I loved most. I felt a wave of relief and gratitude. It wasn't just about winning a court case. It was about reclaiming my life, my children, and my peace. I realized that no matter what others tried to take from me, my love and dedication to my family could never be destroyed. As I looked out the window that evening, Emily and Thomas playing in the yard, I understood the most important lesson of all. The world may test you, people may betray you, but courage, resilience, and love will always guide you home. Life was quieter now, but I had learned that even small moments could hold surprises. Emily and Thomas were thriving, yet every day reminded me to stay vigilant. I never let my guard down completely, but I was determined to let the children live without constant fear. One morning, while preparing breakfast, I noticed something strange outside the window. A car slowly drove past our house twice before disappearing around the corner. My heart skipped a beat. I knew it wasn't Daniel or Sarah. They had no power here, but my instincts told me that danger could come from unexpected places. I called the local police to report the car, and began documenting every detail. I taught Emily and Thomas to recognize strangers, but also to continue enjoying life. We went for walks in the park, spent time in the library, and even went on small road trips. Life was healing, but I remained cautious. I also began connecting with other parents who had faced similar threats. Sharing experiences, learning strategies, and helping one another created a small but strong support network. I realized that community was an essential shield against fear and isolation. Then came a subtle but shocking event that reminded me that vigilance was never truly over. One evening, while Emily and Thomas played in the yard, I noticed a figure in the distance, hiding behind a tree. I couldn't see clearly, but the silhouette was unsettling. My pulse raced. I grabbed my phone and snapped a picture, then called the police. By the time they arrived, the figure had vanished. This event, though minor compared to previous attacks, reminded me that danger often comes in unexpected ways. It reinforced the life lesson I had learned the hard way. Trust your instincts, and always prioritize the safety of those you love. Despite the tension, we continued to rebuild our lives. Emily started attending a new school, making friends and excelling in her classes. Thomas joined a soccer team, laughing and running with the carefree spirit every child deserves. Watching them, I felt a mix of pride and relief, proof that love and resilience could overcome even the darkest circumstances. And just when I began to feel a sense of peace, the next extreme event occurred. A sudden health scare that shook me to my core. One evening, I collapsed while preparing dinner, my vision blurring and my chest tightening. Thomas screamed, and Emily ran to help me. I realized then that protecting my children wasn't just about shielding them from external threats. It also meant taking care of myself. The moment I collapsed in the kitchen, fear gripped me, not just for myself, but for Emily and Thomas. Their little faces were filled with panic, and I realized how much they depended on me. Paramedics arrived quickly, and I was rushed to the hospital. The diagnosis was a severe panic-induced episode, caused by months of stress and constant vigilance. Physically, I was okay. But mentally, I had carried far too much for far too long. The hospital stay was a wake-up call. I realized that surviving danger wasn't enough. I had to care for myself to truly protect my children. I began therapy, learning ways to manage stress, anxiety, and the residual trauma of the threats we had endured. Slowly, I started to feel stronger, calmer, more in control of my life. Emily and Thomas visited every day, bringing drawings, small gifts, and laughter that filled the sterile hospital room with warmth. Watching them, I knew I had to be strong not just for them, but for myself. Love was my anchor, and it reminded me that no matter how dark life became, hope could always shine through. Once home, life settled into a new rhythm. I balanced safety with normalcy, ensuring the children could enjoy their lives without constant fear, while remaining prepared for anything unexpected. Emily returned to school full-time, excelling in her studies, and Thomas joined a new soccer league, laughing and running like a carefree child. I also reconnected with old friends and family, building a network of support that made me realize I didn't have to face challenges alone. Life after trauma was not just about survival. It was about rebuilding community, love, and joy. And then one final, shocking event reminded me just how far we had come. One afternoon, a package arrived at our door. My heart skipped a beat, and my hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a letter from Sarah, written in her familiar scrawled handwriting. "You may have survived, but don't think this is over." I felt a surge of fear, but also a wave of calm determination. I had survived every attack, every threat, every betrayal. Sarah's words no longer held power over me. I realized that true freedom comes not from avoiding threats, but from rising above them. I shredded the letter, looked at my children, and smiled. "We are safe. We are strong. And nothing can take that away from us," I whispered. Life had finally found a steady rhythm. The storms, the attacks, the betrayals, they were behind us. Emily and Thomas laughed freely, their joy a constant reminder that resilience can transform even the darkest past into a hopeful present. I watched them play in the yard one sunny afternoon, and felt a wave of peace I hadn't known in years. I had rebuilt not just a home, but a life. Every lock, every camera, every safety measure had been worth it. Not just for protection, but to create a sanctuary where love and happiness could flourish. I had learned to trust my instincts, to set boundaries, and to never allow anyone to take control of my life again. Through therapy and reflection, I discovered strength I didn't know I possessed. Fear had been a constant companion, but courage had become my guide. I realized that true power comes from standing firm in the face of betrayal, protecting those you love, and choosing hope when despair seems inevitable. Sarah's threats no longer frightened me. Daniel's choices no longer dictated my emotions. Their shadows were distant now, powerless against the life I had claimed for myself and my children. I understood that survival wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a life rebuilt with love, vigilance, and determination. We celebrated small victories every day. Emily's school achievements, Thomas scoring a goal in soccer, and quiet family dinners where laughter replaced fear. These moments reminded me that life, even after devastation, could be beautiful. To all who have followed my story, remember this. Life may bring heartbreak, betrayal, and danger, but your resilience, courage, and love can carry you through. Protect those you love, trust your instincts, and never let fear control your future. Even when your world seems shattered, you can rise stronger than before. Before I end, let me reintroduce myself one last time for everyone new here. My name is Margaret Lewis, I'm 66 years old, and I'm speaking from South Carolina, USA. Please like, subscribe, and click the notification bell so you don't miss more stories like mine. And I'd love to know, which part of the country are you watching from? Broken heart, my world had ended the moment my husband chose her instead of me. But through courage, love, and resilience, I rebuilt it. Today, my children and I are safe, happy, and thriving. And that is the most important victory of all.